Good evening. Tonight in this Anglia Report special, we shall be looking back at the violent hurricane that ripped through the eastern counties just 10 days ago, leaving a trail of havoc and destruction in its wake. It was the worst disaster of its kind in Britain since records began. Tonight we shall be reporting on the heroic struggle of the power engineers to reconnect the hundreds of thousands of homes plunged into darkness. And we will also be assessing the long-term effects the hurricane will have on the look of our countryside. But first, let's go back to the beginning and the scenes that greeted thousands of people as they woke on the morning of Friday, October the 16th. Tens of thousands of trees were uprooted right across the region, causing destruction on an unprecedented scale. Trees that have survived the gales of centuries were plucked from the ground like saplings by winds that gusted at over 100 miles an hour. Hundreds of roads around the region were blocked by overturned vehicles and fallen trees. For a time, transport ground to a halt. The police warned people not to venture outside their homes for their own safety. In all, more than 20 people were killed in the east and south of England. The bill for the damage is still being calculated, but it's likely to run into hundreds of millions of pounds. Claims to insurance companies are likely to hit record levels. But the greatest task of all in the aftermath of the hurricane fell to the men and women of Eastern Electricity. Now, this map shows the region's power supply as it was before the storm struck. The red lights here indicating the main towns in the region. Now, if we take the lights down in the studio, we can show you the scale of the problem that the engineers faced. At around 5 a.m. on the morning of Friday, October the 16th, this is what happened. Nearly 40% of the region was plunged into darkness, mostly along the east of the region, with Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk being the worst affected counties. At its worst, 750,000 consumers were cut off. The Electricity Board repair teams swung into action. Every available engineer was drafted in to help restore supplies. By midnight on Saturday, October the 17th, this was the situation. Several 100,000 consumers were reconnected, but 13% were still without power. Most of them again on this strip down the east of the region. For many thousands of people, what lay ahead was days and days of shivering darkness, as Bob Ledwidge reports.
Music, information, radio for well.
It's 5 o'clock. This is Stephen Foster. Engineers are battling to restore electricity to thousands of Suffolk homes cut off during the hurricane. Men from as far afield as South Wales and Yorkshire have been drafted in to repair hundreds of faults that have left households without power for the second day running. Residents are having to make do with camping stoves and candles, and electricity chiefs...
Throughout last week, the linesmen from Eastern Electricity and their reinforcements from other boards worked day and night on the overhead lines. While at home, people like Mary Juvie, with a young family to feed, got used to life without power.
It's been very difficult in the fact that it's taken so long to feed all of us. I've been doing baked potatoes underneath the fire, soup, beans, spaghetti and things, anything in a tin on the fire. And we've been eating sandwiches a lot.
Just over the road, the Lightfoot family had problems amusing the children, but discovered a new community spirit.
I mean, we've spoken to people that we haven't seen for months. You know, we've probably spoken to more people over this last week than we have in the last year. You know, people talk more, don't they, in a crisis?
How long have you been without power? Good morning, Helpline Electric. Can I help you?
Helpline Electric, can I help you?
Helpline Electric was set up at Eastern Electricity headquarters near Ipswich to offer practical help to people in need. Staff were taken off their normal duties to man the phones. They received 400 calls a day.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Christine, what was that call about?
That was about an elderly lady who's nearly 90, living in a priory, all on her own, out in the depths of the country. She's been without light, water or electricity and telephone since last Friday. Things are getting urgent. She's distressed. She's called on the postman this morning. The postman has gone back to the village postmaster and reported her distressed state to him.
6 days after the hurricane, there were still 18,000 customers without power, and hardship had set in for many of those waiting to be reconnected. But the helpline managed to get generators, gas lights, cookers, and even a portion of fish and chips delivered to people in need. Any call involving the elderly or young babies was given top priority.
This morning I had a lady who's been without power since Friday. She's got an 11-week-old baby. She herself is poorly and she was at desperation point this morning. They're just running out of gas and everything now, and we're doing everything we possibly can to get their power back.
In the first few days, thousands were reconnected at a time because the men were clearing faults on high-voltage lines serving large areas. When they got down to low-voltage faults, one repair would restore power to just a handful of homes. The command post for the whole operation, Engineering Control Centre in Ipswich. It's always calm here. Even on the morning of the hurricane, as the alarm bells rang, there was no panic because one mistake by a controller could lead to linesmen being electrocuted. On that fateful Friday, the computer went crazy. 50 metres of printout showed faults in the Eastern electricity system by the thousand. Suffolk and Essex were hit particularly hard.
In a normal day in Eastern Electricity Board, we deal with 50 fault incidents. On this day, we experienced 10,000 at least. So we're trying to compress 6 months of repair work into 6 days.
That's a massive operation. How have you gone about coping with it?
Basically with the electric army. We declared an emergency at 7:15 on the Friday morning, and then our priorities are to make sure we get the resources of helicopters, of manpower and of materials, which will see us right through to the end, bearing in mind that our people in many cases are working 24 hours a day, rain, shine, whatever.
All armies, even the electric army, march on their stomachs. It's breakfast time at the Stowmarket depot. The emergency canteen is being run by Eastern Electricity office staff. Judith Hall is normally in the marketing department. Today, she's serving the bacon. Over 700 engineers from other boards have been drafted in, from as far away as Northern Ireland.
Well, today's been our first day. We haven't really got a chance to see anything or do anything yet. We've just got on the time for our tea, you know.
And where have you been put up while you're working over here?
Staying in Bury St Edmunds in a guest house.
How are you blending in with the English people you're working with?
Not so bad for so far.
Can they understand you?
Well, kinda, but I can't understand them.
More than 120 soldiers, including men from the Royal Artillery, joined the massive operation to restore the region's power supplies.
We'll try and get you a helicopter there this afternoon so that they can do a line patrol from the air and see exactly what is going on. Should probably get there about 1,300, something like that. Would that be okay?
Up to 16 helicopters at a time were being used for repair work. Well over 1,000 poles were replaced in 1 week, along with 450 kilometres of overhead line. Energy Secretary Cecil Parkinson was well satisfied with the whole operation.
I think the emergency procedures have worked well, but we've been discussing that since I arrived, and one of the things that I think, for instance, has come out of it, the use of helicopters. Helicopters have been used far more than was ever originally envisaged, in far greater numbers, and have been very, very useful. So we will be, obviously, when it's all over and we've got people back, be looking at see if there are lessons to be learned. But at the moment, the priority is not learning lessons. The priority is getting people back on supply.
Clearly, there's been close cooperation between the different electricity boards. Cecil Parkinson said his plans to privatise them wouldn't lead to a drop in levels of public service. As he met linesmen in the field, he praised them and the public for their contribution.
People have been very patient, very tolerant, and very good humoured. And I think one of the most marvellous things about this is people haven't been ringing up in a moaning spirit, but they've been ringing up saying, we know you're working hard, but we have this very special problem. I think the spirit is terrific, both of the public and of the board's employees. Everybody's working together. Thank you for what you're doing. Are you finding it interesting? Just a tremendous job is underway, and I'm very proud of the way the people here are tackling it. That's fine.
For some people, loss of electricity was the least of their worries. In Ipswich, the power of nature was brought home all too graphically. The beech tree which crashed into his bedroom left Kamran Zuberi unhurt, but with a house that's uninhabitable.
Well, this is my bedroom. It was, or what's left of it. That's where the bed used to be, in that corner there. I was asleep in it at the time. I was woken up by the sound of beech nuts hit crashing against that window. And sort of shortly afterwards, there was a very loud bang. And although it was pitch dark, I could feel things landing on the bed. There was a sound of breaking glass and sort of crashing bricks and things. The instinct was to run, run like hell. I think I was more terrified afterwards when I saw exactly the extent of the damage and how close I'd come.
The Beelings near Woodbridge, where villagers had more than their fair share of fallen trees and were left without power for 9 days. Although Eastern Electricity had a total of 4,000 people out on the ground, the scale of the disaster meant it was a long time before places like this got back on supply. This sign is now little more than a bad joke when you see the other obstacles which are blocking this private driveway. What makes matters worse is that this drive leads to an old people's home. 30 trees are going to have to be cleared before the cars come through here again. It really is quite an obstacle course, this. And 1 week after the hurricane, the residents of the old folks' home are still without mains electricity. I'm going to pick my way through and find out how they're getting on. The Grove is run by a charity called the Distressed Gentlefolks Aid Association. After the hurricane, the biggest problem was lack of heating. The residents were full of praise for the way the staff had coped with the crisis, but for some it had been a distressing week.
The cables had come down, electric cables in the drive, so that if anybody had gone down there, they'd have been electrocuted. And the telephone wires came down, so that it was impossible to phone for firemen. And they gave us night lights, and they took them away at 8 o'clock for fear of fire.
After 4 days, an RAF generator was brought in by a back route through farmland, but it couldn't run lights and heating at the same time. Things were so bad in Suffolk that the clearance of the trees which blocked the driveway wasn't considered an emergency by the contractors. The damage, darkness and shortages brought back poignant memories.
It is amazing, you see, just like the war, how you went about without blackout. With the blackout, you just have to do it. No, you can't, there's no such thing as I can't.
When the lights go on again, all over the world, and the boys are home again, all over the world.
Bob Ledwidge reporting. Well, with me now to give his assessment of the battle to reconnect the region is the chairman of Eastern Electricity, Jim Smith. Well, Jim, first of all, are there any people in the region who are still now without power?
There is no one without power as a result of the storm, the hurricane. We reconnected the last customer from there at about 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
So you've just got everybody back on now?
Everyone is back, yes.
Now, have you been able to estimate the cost of this enormous operation?
Difficult. Looking through the books now, but we're estimating somewhere about £5 to £6 million of that order.
Now, where's that money going to come from? Because people may be concerned that it's going to go on increased electricity charges.
Yes. First of all, it's a 1 in 100, 150 year happening, so it isn't something that will go on to the bill regularly per annum. The other thing is the board is insured. We have an insurance for catastrophe insurance such as this, and it may be that on our account we may have to deal with £1 million to £2 million, and we will cope with that within our normal budgeting.
So you've obviously still got work to do permanent repairs. How long will it take you before the final bit of work to clear up this mess is
I think it's going to be the remainder of the winter before we can say that we have the system back to where it was before the blow.
James Smith, thank you very much indeed. That's all for this special edition of Anglia Reports. We'll be back with a new series in 2 weeks' time. Until then, good night.